to have an additional conversation today. New rules, right? We said new rules for today's Blacks, and we had a church edition. And for those of you on YouTube who missed the part where I said just a minute ago, there's this quote that has sort of been ruminating in my spirit, where basically it, as I said, and I've quoted, I did not come up with this quote, but as I just repeated to the Urban View audience, it is nasty business to be told and to believe that your ancestors were religiously diabolical and devilish, and the people who colonized them were angels. And the people who colonized them were the ones that you should be following and listening to. So again, figure it out. Black church, figure it out. But I have a new set of new rules. And this is about education. We have not had an extensive conversation about Prager University yet. And we have to have a conversation about Prager University because Prager University is going to basically be used to replace PBS. Now, some of you may be thinking, what is Prager University? I've never heard of this before. It's basically a white Christian nationalist version of media content and production. And Prager University, they've got several millions of followers when you look at their social media account. But basically, Prager University is the brainchild of very white Christian nationalist kind of folks who believe that not in history. They don't believe in history. They believe in American mythology. And so a lot of us have kids going back to school this fall. Some of you already got your kids back in school. But the new rule for today's Blacks Education Edition says that it is no longer American history. It is white historical myths, unless proven otherwise, because this is what your kids are going to be learning in K through 12. It's what they're going to be learning in college. And so if you are, as a Black, you're part of the Black community, if you are not sending your children to an African-centered Saturday school, hush. Just shush until you can figure out how to do that. If you yourself are not attending an African-centered Saturday school or some other form of learning, or maybe you're in Nubia and you're going to In Class with Cara, you're participating in the videos. Shout out to Nubia. I'm going to give them a plug always. One, because it's dope, and two, because it's the largest Pan-African learning gathering space online. And that's Nubia with the K, K-N-U-B-I. I'm sorry. Nubia is the social media wing of Narrative. Narrative is what I should be talking about. Narrative with the K, K-N-A-R-A-T. How do I spell narrative? Hold on. KNARRATIVE.com. Narrative.com. Largest Pan-African learning space. Please do not be mad at me because I forgot how to spell narrative because it's got a K in it. It doesn't in the actual language that we speak. But my point is this. If you are not in some sort of pro-Black, and I mean explicit, I don't mean people of color. I don't mean melanated, although you know I love me some melanation. I mean Black. If you are not connected, you as an adult and you as your children or the people in your family, if you are not connected to a pro-Black education space, we got Black History 365 Foundation, we got Narrative, we got Dr. Carr doing everything he can but calling on the name of Black Horus Asara Setnehru. I was gonna say in the name of Black Jesus, but I think he would quibble with that. Find you somebody that you can sit under, groups of people that you can study with, not even just sit under, study with, because this issue with Prager University and PBS being taken off the air, this is a big deal. So the White House, according to Vox Media, the White House has a preferred alternative to PBS, and it may already be in countless classrooms. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, as you guys may recall, last week they announced that they had to shut down because Congress voted to remove over $500,000 from their federal funding. And so that includes really negative impacts for PBS and NPR stations across the country. They have already had to engage in cuts. And now the White House has decided that they have a new educational partner. And they launched at this event. They had a launch event for this new educational partner called PragerU. PragerU, you have probably heard about before because during the pandemic, when white women got upset, not the righteous whites, but when white women got upset at the fact that their white children were going to protest for George Floyd and coming home and asking very difficult questions about, oh my God, Mom, did you know that racism exists and that we as white people have benefits that we did not earn? White women went crazy. White men lost their minds. And we know this because we played video clips on this show of young white children talking to their parents where they would film themselves talking with their parents and their white parents were livid. Oh my God, Jenny, why are you always talking about racism? We're white. We're not, but we're working class. We're poor. We don't benefit from race. What are you talking about? And we remember these videos. And what happened after the summer of George Floyd protests when 26 million Americans all across in states all across the country and millions of people around the world went to protest on behalf of Black people and racial justice? What happened? What happened? White women tapped tapped into their Daughters of the Confederacy heritage, and they began organizing Moms for what? Liberty. Do you remember this? You should remember this, because do you remember the videos of people who didn't even have kids in the school showing up at the school board, basically running school board members who had been duly elected by their neighbors out of office and replacing them with white nationalists who were scared of woke? They were scared of CRT, and they could not stand this woke agenda. And what was the woke agenda? Actual history being taught in schools. Black history, which is actual history being taught in schools. LGBTQ people in schools having access to books that had LGBTQ characters in them. It was a moment that people who are a part of these communities had been advocating for and had been fighting for. And so that woke education pissed off the Karen Brigade. Sorry, Karen Hunter. I know. And Karen Walters and Karen Godfrey, all the Karens that I know who are black. I know one white Karen. I know many Karens. They're all black except the one. Sorry for what they have done to your name. It should have been Becky, but whatever. It is what it is. We're basically at a point right now where that white women frustration with Jenny and Trevor coming home and asking questions about race that they did not want to answer, and their fear that one day Jenny and Trevor were going to open up a history book and see a picture of their Meemaw and their Pap at a lynching campaign. They did not want that to happen, and so they shut shit down. Remember, they got rid of books. They closed down libraries. They got rid of black educators. They did the same thing that they did at the end of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Prager University came about around that time, or really came to prominence. It was actually founded in 2009, and it has basically become the conservative educational PBS. It's the conservative answer, the right wing and white wing racist answer to what education is today. What black parents were fighting for when we were fighting for our kids to get access to a culturally competent education. Prager University is the white Daughters of the Confederacy, Moms for Liberty version of what education should look like. And so you may recall that this was the organization that put out videos. Many of them were narrated by people like Candace Owens. Do with that information what the fuck you will. But people like Candace Owens, who basically did apology videos talking about how slavery was not invented by white people. And I don't know what Candace Owens' voice actually sounds like. I know that's not really her voice, but she feels to me like a white adjacent black woman who has desired whiteness. And so that's why she gets that voice. But she had a whole video, over 5 minutes long, animated video, where she was talking about the fact that slavery was not invented by white people. And it's an apology video for slavery. And it's an apology video that basically says, white people didn't invent slavery, and we don't know why the blacks just can't get over it. And it was that sort of video that said things like that they weren't slaves that came over, or I'm sorry, they weren't enslaved Africans that came over. They were workers. Do you remember when there was all the kerfluffle because some of the school books that were coming out of states like Texas, which is a really big deal because if it's in a school book in Texas, chances are it's going to be in a school book all across the country because Texas buys so many school books because of their population. Well, do you remember how they had school books that talked about the fact that there weren't slavery? It wasn't slavery. It was indentured servitude. And they were like on a migrant program. Like it was like an internship. They were workers, not enslaved Africans. And so this is the organization that the White House is now considering to replace PBS. They want this sort of white man segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. They want that sort of approach to education. And they want it not just on your public access televisions. They want it in your schools. Chances are it's already in schools that you might be attending. Now, Prager University, this partnership that they're talking about, it's not the first time that they have partnered with the federal government. They have actually partnered with a number of states. They have partnered with a number of superintendents. So chances are your children are already learning the whitest of whitewashed history. Now, some of you are thinking, Lurie, come on now, sis. Even though black parents have been advocating, we know good and goddamn well there wasn't a whole lot of black kids getting access to accurate information. You're correct, which is why they're functionally illiterate and stupid now. And I have kids in this generation, functionally illiterate and stupid. Love them, God bless them, but don't know basic things. Like if they're not coming from a household that provided them an additional education, they don't know basic things. And considering Prager University is from the same group of people who like alternative facts, who don't like to deal with Jeffrey Epstein files, but want to deal with all sorts of other distractions, it makes sense to me that they would have an educational manifesto and an approach to education that's basically the lies my white teachers told me to make me feel good about myself, but animated with jazz hands. And so we're in a moment right now where you should be aware of not what's just happening at the federal level, but you should also know that this is already infiltrating your schools, particularly if you are in states that were part of the Confederacy. So Prager University is made up by a number of people. Dennis Prager, who is, according to Vox magazine, a conservative talk show host who started everything in Prager. It was founded in 2009. His partner is a screenwriter by the name of Alan Estrin. I ain't never heard of either of these people except Prager. The goal, according to Vox, was, quote, both educational and political. They viewed the educational system we now have as being too liberal and dominated by those ideas, so they were going to counter it. But first, they were going for college students, and then in 2021, it began expanding to younger students. And what was happening in 2021? Moms for Liberty was really getting itself together. So according to this article, I'm going to read you an excerpt from it. This is a bit of a transcript and a conversation between the interviewer and the interviewee. And they asked him, can you give us an example of a PragerU video that seems to be explicitly trying to provide a conservative narrative in response to a pre-existing liberal one? Now, I take a little issue with that because the idea that enslaved Africans were enslaved, that's not a pre-existing liberal idea that's committed to CRT. That's just the truth. It is the fact of what happened. And here's what the response is to that question. I think a good example is the New York Times 1619 Project, which was published to mark the 400th anniversary of the first slaves brought to what became the United States. The 1619 Project really centered slavery in the American story and said that this was essential to understanding American history. And a lot of conservatives objected to that, to the idea of framing American history in such a negative way. They were saying, why? Or are we saying all of American history is shaped by this? Why not talk about how we got rid of slavery? Why not talk about the abolitionists? Why not talk about, freedom and all the other things that were behind the revolution and all of that? And so the answer goes, that was a conservative pushback. And what we see in the PragerU videos is in sort of subtle ways a counter to that. There's a video with Christopher Columbus who was talking to modern day kids who are basically saying, I heard bad things about you, Chris. And Christopher Columbus's character says, you have to judge me by the standards that were true at that time, making it seem as though Christopher Columbus, when he was engaging in wanton and wholesale destruction of people and genocide, well, at the time, that's just what people did. Nah, fool, that's what white colonizers did. Because everybody else who was being colonized was like, what the fuck are you doing? This is terrible. You can't do this. This is awful. According to the standards of the time, you are a terrible, awful, no good, very bad person, Christopher Columbus, and you should not be accepted here. And what did Christopher Columbus do? It's not just that he discovered America, which is white people's way of racist, white people's way of explaining that Christopher Columbus got lost because he couldn't even use the maps that the North Africans had given him, because yes, that man had maps. He just could not read. He couldn't read the maps that the North Africans had gave him because according to Ivan Van Sertima, and they came before Columbus, it's a good book, you should check it out, we was already here. Now, I know some of you take that a bridge too far and say that we were already living here and abiding here, and that's a conversation for another day. My point is this: Prager University is the white Karen Moms for Liberty response to the fears that they had about their children learning the history of this country in real time. And so when your kids are coming home from school, you should be clear that it's not that they're learning American history. They're learning white mythology. And we got to make sure our kids understand that, because we got to differentiate for them the difference between actual history and white mythology. White mythology is basically the stories that racist white people tell themselves that allow them to sleep well at night. And now that they have this partnership that is pending with Prager University and the federal government, just know that that is once again going to be the standard. And parents who used to be organizing and fighting against it, well, now when you're fighting for your children to have access to culturally competent materials in the classroom, you're a racist. You're a reverse racist, and you're a racist against the whites, because it was the whites who worked to make sure that slavery ended eventually, kind of, sort of, and that's the story that they're going to stick to. There are now, according to the report, 8 states that have a partnership with Prager University. Here are the states. And none of these are not going to surprise you. Some of them will. Louisiana, Florida, not a surprise there. New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Montana, and Arizona, South Carolina, and Idaho. They have partners. They are states that have now formed partnerships with Prager University. In Oklahoma, where that man who watched pornos in his office and basically has some sort of sexual deviancy concern, he is overly concerned about the sexual activities of the teachers in the school district, even though he be having superintendent meetings and them naked women be on chiropractic desks, like on the videos that they watching at the superintendent meeting, and then he got caught and he's fighting. Now, y'all remember him, Ryan Walters? Y'all remember him? We talked about him. Basically, we're in a situation where those sorts of people are going to be bringing in a Prager University sort of environment into your school system. So again, it's not American history, it's white mythology. But if you do not currently have access to a Black-centered Saturday school, to an African-centered after-school program for you and your kids, because it ain't just enough for our kids to go, because a lot of y'all listening to me right now, you're Gen X and younger. You weren't alive when all these things were happening in terms of civil rights, and a lot of us just did not learn these things. I only know these things because I actually majored in this in college. college, and it has been a form of study for me my entire adulthood. So if you don't have one, you have to get in connection with the people in your community to build one, because your kids are going to come home on some bullshit. And now that states like Texas and Florida and other states of the Confederacy, and we know this is going to spread, are passing laws that basically say if your house is considered unstable, or if you're homeless, then they can suspend your children from school. They are going to, and we just talked about the right to privacy with Imani Gandhi. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, you probably did not get a chance to catch that unless you're also listening on Urban View. But the right to privacy, where you get to determine what your kids learn in school, where you get to determine whether or not they should be exposed to certain information, that is also going to come under scrutiny. It is already coming under scrutiny. So if you don't have access to a Black-centered Saturday school or an African school, how do you start one? Think about that. Go online. I've talked about starting Saturday schools ever since I was on Karen Hunter's show years ago. And so think about what educational needs your community has. Find like-minded people in your community and start to build it. Now, some of you are thinking, Lurie, I ain't got time to do all this. I got to go to work. I got these kids. Do you like slavery? Because slavery is where we're headed. So figure it out, schedule it on your lunch break, get on a Zoom call in between smoke breaks, whatever it is you got to do, because it's either we do this shit for ourselves or we live in a world where they have reestablished the legal framework to re-enslave our Black asses. Now, some of us are making provisions to get the fuck out. All of us ain't going to be able to do that. So either we resist now, or we might find that our ability to resist later has been utterly pragered. We should make that a verb. So new rules for today's Blacks. Figure out what the hell your church is doing, and if they're not doing anything to advance the interests explicitly of Black people. And some of you are like, well, we got white people in our church. Are they not accomplices? If there are white people sitting in your Black church and they are not accomplices willing to use their white privilege to help you, why are they sitting in your church so comfortably? And why are you the uncomfortable one? You should ask yourself about that. So that's the new rules for Black people, today's Blacks church edition. But the new rules for today's Blacks education edition: get you a Saturday school, and after school, something, some sort of institution. Connect with Narrative, connect with Black History 365, connect with the Black Male Educator Alliance, connect with the Black Educator. Find it, build it. They're coming for your kids' minds. They're coming for our minds. They already got the apparatus in place. And once they end up sweeping all of our cities with the National Guard and all the police and the ICE and the this and the that and the other, you going to wish you had made time to prioritize the education of your children. God help us if we don't. We got to get ready to go to commercial break. Glenn Singleton, the founder of Courageous Conversations, will be joining us on the other side. Lots to get to, and we'll take your calls as well. Much more to come on the Lurie Daniel Favors Show.